Okay, I see the red button.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you everyone and welcome to tonight's discussion. Tonight we will aim to have a conversation in a mutual understanding field for which we, OASA and ODA, are accepted as registered associations from the German government. We're not supporting any election campaigns, but we will discuss important political topics. That's also why there's 4 politicians amongst us. We will, because there is so many of us, and it's also unprecedented that we have this number of high-profile politicians, we would still have to ask you to try to be as brief as possible in your answers so that we can give every one of you enough space to talk about the same time as one another. Having said that, please just add information that you think is clear and try to be as laconic and concise as possible so that we can briefly use this, this allocated 90 minutes in the best way for the viewers on Facebook. I'll start with some introductions, even though most people here don't need introducing. I'll start as from the order of my screen with Dr. Vjosa Osmani. She's the acting president of Kosovo. She has an academic background in law, having taught at the University of Pristina, but also as a visiting academic in the US. Needless to say, she has also been the most voted woman in the Kosovo parliament in the last 2 elections, if I'm not mistaken. Moving on to Albin Kurti, who is the prior prime minister, an activist, is the chairman and the founder of Levizja Vetëvendosja, meaning self-determination in English. And moving on to Manuel Sarrazin from the Greens party in Germany. He's a German member of parliament. He's also a member of the Committees on Foreign Affairs and the Committee on European Affairs, which is why we're happy to have him here from the German political perspective. And also from previously a German political background is Viola von Cramon, currently a member of European Parliament, but also had her fair share in the German Parliament until 2017. Yes, currently the role of Viola von Cramon is as a rapporteur for the Western Balkans, including the Republic of Kosovo for the European Parliament. Moving on to my dear friend Muhamet Idrizi, a refugee child from Mitrovica, a 2-time Fulbright scholar, currently a PhD candidate at the University of Armed Forces in Pedagogy in Hamburg. He is also a lifetime civil servant, which doesn't sound as legendary in English as it sounds in German. But he is a teacher in Hamburg. He is the founder of ODA. And yes, Muhamet, thank you for putting this together. Yeah, I gladly pass the word to you.
I would like to introduce also Emiljo Jazxhi, who is born in Kurtu in Albania, migrated to Germany for studies. He is a financial data analyst with profession and was a founding member and previous board member of the Organization of Albanian Students and Alumni located in Berlin. He is also an active member in several other youth diaspora organizations like European Youth Parliament and Debatte. He is interested in socio-economic topics and in the Western Balkan and representation of diasporas. So dear participants, dear friends who are following us in the home countries, but also in the diaspora in Germany and around the world, we had a lot of questions from our friends. So we made 3 political blocks we want to talk about. The first one will be the political situation in Kosovo and the Western Balkan and the German presidency, like evaluation. The second one will be the EU integration of Kosovo and the states of the Western Balkans. Where are we now? What changed in the last months? And the third, of course, due to the fact that we are here Albanian diaspora, we would also talk about the role of the Albanian diaspora, maybe more in the German-speaking countries because we are in the German-speaking countries, but I guess we will talk in general. So I would like to ask the first question, and we would like to start with Mrs. Osmani, then keep on going to Mrs. Cramon, then Mr. Kurti and Mr. Sarrazin. So could you briefly describe the political situation from your point of view of Kosovo and the other Western Balkan countries? So how is the political situation from your point of view, and maybe also the institutional way you are acting. So to have like a short input, please, Mrs. Osmani.
I'll try to be as short as possible. Obviously, the biggest significant challenge that we are facing is the one that deals with health and as well as the economic crisis as a consequence. But as you know, this is something that we see as a challenge across the world. But I believe that this very much has also altered the way we see politics and the way we do politics. Alongside with this significant health and economic crisis, we've been facing quite a political turmoil, as you know, but also quite many years where Kosovo has been facing internal problems, practically because of the challenge of crime and corruption. That, I believe, is one of the obstacles which will need to be fought hard in order to make sure that then we can be successful, both when it comes to institutional policies as well as those that deal with sectorial challenges such as health and economy. But I'll get back to that later on. Practically, if I can sum up the entire situation in politics in Kosovo with a very short answer, it would be, well, we just had our very final plenary session in the Parliament of Kosovo after around 1 year of a mandate, because it started on the 24th of December 2019 and it ended, so practically 1 year later, because of the political turmoil, which was, I believe, caused primarily for one significant reason, and that was the violation of the will of the people. So I did end up this final session of the Parliament today by saying that while I wish all the current MPs health and success, I do hope that whoever is elected next time will primarily respond to what is the will of the people of Kosovo. I am very much hopeful that the upcoming election that will happen pretty soon will see a considerable change. There is a strong sense of hope among the people of Kosovo, and it is our duty to make sure that this hope is then transferred into concrete action that will make their life much better and much easier and bring prosperity, especially for the younger generation, so that they can see Kosovo a place that is one to not just love, but also one where they can see a perspective for their lives and their jobs and their education. So I will not take longer than that because the question is very general, unless you'd like me to get into the details of different areas of politics and how I see them.
We will specify it later, so we have
right.
an additional question to that one. Thank you.
Let me thank you for organizing this. That should have been said at the very beginning, but it's a great honor and pleasure to talk to you, to talk to our outstanding diaspora, and of course to be among great friends.
Thank you very much. Ms. Cramon?
Thanks a lot, Muhamet and Emiljo, for putting together this great panel. It's an honor, even we are on the, let's say, Christmas season and actually on vacation. I was very glad that you have organized that and that we have an opportunity to talk about this very important topic. I can only agree with what Vjosa Osmani has already mentioned. I mean, COVID is, of course, dominating, not just in the Western Balkan states, of course, but it is still all over Europe. And that's why I was glad that we could manage at least to give a lot of, let's say, financial support and assistance to the Western Balkan states. And hopefully it will also find the way to the right and most vulnerable groups in Kosovo and in the Western Balkan region, while we know that it's not always easy and it is definitely also not always the case. Apart from this, we have just drafted our report, or progress report, from the Parliament side. We have submitted all our amendments and they will probably debated at the end of January, mid-January, and hopefully then debated in the AFET committee at the beginning of February. But since we have only very limited resources and slots for the hybrid session, it's not really clear when we will find and get a slot for this. So even if we look for, let's say, very timely and a very soonish debate, while we have already skipped 1 year due to the corona restriction, this is not so easy. I think it is important to stress that with, let's say, the upcoming and very challenging election campaign times, we should also think about whether we can have, like what we say in Germany, a classical Briefwahl, yeah, so a mail opportunity even for the population and the residents of Kosovo. I don't know whether the acting president and the MPs have talked about this, and the Central Election Committee was consulted in that, whether there is an opportunity, because of course we would like to avoid any kind of a super spreader event on the 28th of February next year. Apart from this, I think that there is a big unity in the European Parliament that Kosovo is surely the most European and the most, let's say, global state amongst the 6 Western Balkan states. It is very nice to see how much you are committed on the European integration path, while we had a big majority and a big unity amongst us. Let's leave apart the right wings and the left wings, but the let's say the classic 5 in the middle were very much in favor of seeing Kosovo in general on a very good path, while of course with the, let's say, less stable situation after the topple down of the Kurti government, that was a kind of a strategy. But I guess we will speak about this in a more detail in a later question. In general, I see there's a big tendency really for great support for Kosovo, and maybe we should also stress that with the new Biden administration, we hopefully also see a new transatlantic initiative especially from the new Biden team, not just going for new unilateral initiatives and not just going for any kind of, let's say, short noticed, coordinated actions, what we have seen during the last 18 months, but hopefully then a more coordinated way of working together with some of the member states, as well, of course, with the European Union, and not just on the dialogue, but also in terms of the fighting corruption, crime, and fighting for the essential reforms, where I guess we will also speak about a little bit later. So thanks a lot for having me in the first round now.
Thank you. Mr. Kurti?
Thank you very much for inviting me to this virtual event where we can zoom some of the main developments and issues in the Western Balkans, and especially in Kosovo. Thank you, Muhamet. It's an honor to be here with you, Madam President Osmani, Madam von Cramon, Mr. Sarrazin. It's a great opportunity to discuss at the end of this year this interesting, perhaps a bit too interesting year, and next one, which will come soon with elections in Kosovo, elections in Albania, and again, elections in Kosovo in autumn next year, because we will have local elections, municipal elections, in addition to parliamentary ones early next year. We are unfortunately closing this year with around 1,300 deaths of COVID-19 pandemic. And this is a very sad situation, because I believe we could have done much better. And we are now here at this grave situation when we are waiting for the vaccine at some point early next year, but without much preparing and without much certainty among our institutions and society. When I left office on 3rd of June, we had 30 deaths only in over 2.5 months. We started with early lockdown, and in month of May, we brought a number of new cases to 0. And we started gradual opening so we can track all the contacts, and in this way, not just contain, but also eliminate pandemic COVID-19. Unfortunately, the government, after hours, came with this idea of liberating the business community, as if we kept people in prison. And in the name of gaining economic recovery, what has been done is that we lost public health and we didn't gain any kind of economic progress. So I believe that this contrast between public health and economic development has been elevated wrongfully into a contradiction. So they establish a certain order, a certain hierarchy of these two things. On one hand, economy, on the other hand, health. I think that we should do both hand in hand and not put in place a contradiction. So we bring a priority of economy over health, because in that way you lose both. However, I think that next year will be much better, not due to the vaccine only, but also because we will have early elections, and finally we can achieve the compliance between will of the people, as Madam President emphasized, and representation in the institutions. So institutional representation and will of the people should have full compliance in order to have democracy. And without democracy, we lose everything else. Democracy is not just a tool to certain means, it is a value in itself. It's precondition for every kind of progress. On 25th of March this year, I, as Prime Minister, lost half of support in the Parliament, but surprisingly, to majority of people, we doubled support among the people. And in this way, discrepancy between will of the people and political representation reached the highest point, I believe, in after-war Kosovo. So we have to heal now this with new elections. But in order to know the exact date of these elections, all of us, including Madam President, including me, are waiting for the full text of the Constitutional Court decision on the issue of one of the members of Parliament who was not supposed to vote on the 3rd of June for the current government, which was rendered non-constitutional by this decision, because this MP had a final verdict by appeal courts, 15 months sentence in prison due to a corruption scandal. So the government did not have the majority as they pretended on 3rd of June, and they kept on simulating governing, whereas not having simple minimal majority. What
Mr.
I
Kurti,
believe we should...
Mr. Kurti, I really appreciate this explicit points you point out, but I would like to interrupt to give also Mr. Sarrazin the possibility.
Yes.
We will talk about these topics later.
Yeah, sorry. Maybe just to one last...
okay, I'll give you one last sentence.
Yes, one last sentence is that Next year, we should go after a vision for our country where we have solid social floor for our house called State of Kosovo, and again, solid environmental roof. So let me end here and continue with my dear friend, Mr. Sarrazin.
Thank you. So Manuel, please.
Yeah, I like this comparison to a house building. Everybody who saw my house already, Muhamet is one of those, knows that a good roof can save a house, but a good foundation is well to know, especially if you're living in swampy and muddy areas like I'm doing. So I think Viola, Albin, and Vjosa are quite right. 2020 was a really strange year. One could say a really bad year, but I'm not so sure if 2021 will be so much better. And actually, it is almost impossible to say what will happen. Viola is totally right to say that Joe Biden is for sure bringing a difference, even if this administration is not doing much on the Western Balkans, perhaps even not as much as we would hope them to do. That Mr. Grinel is not anymore doing much on the Balkans will already be a big achievement, for sure. So it's funny to say that, because in former times the US quite often had a quite positive part to play, not only on the Western Balkans, also in Eastern Partnership regarding reforms, fight against corruption, and we all know the stories. I know we are lucky if they're not so active anymore, at least, but there's a chance for that. But we are also in a situation where enlargement process is under really, really, really huge problems regarding the trust of the people. The French veto, now the Bulgarian veto for our friends in North Macedonia, is a major blow for this perspective, and we have no idea what the German government will do on this. What will be the perspective of the new government? I think in wording it will be the same like the one now, but nobody knows how exactly the personnel will function, how the important role of Madame Merkel will be substituted or not, and how the let's say bottom-up importance of the region will be done in foreign departments, in the parliament. And let's say it quite frank, I don't know any people in the Western Balkans who trust that the French will be the engine of enlargement. The Slovenians could be, I don't know how many believe in the Austrians too much regarding that. I think in Kosovo, not so many anymore. So the Hungarians, perhaps, I'm not so sure if Mr. Kurti and Vjosa are believing Mr. Orban will bring the right way of enlargement. So Germany is a major point. And if you talk to Viola or me or to anybody else in Germany, nobody even has an idea who will be the chancellor candidate from the Conservatives. Actually, nobody knows who will be the candidate from the Greens as well, but it's not so important because we only have great persons. And we shouldn't underestimate that. Second is that, of course, the pandemics, but also the international situation is not easy to predict. I think the German Council presidency actually was achieved more than it wanted, because I think the clear strategy of Madame Merkel was to achieve nothing in the Council presidency except photos. And suddenly they had to make crisis resolvement with the Corona budget and also with the question of the midterm framework, of the financial midterm framework. But for sure, the situation is still lasting. We don't know the real path of the European Union is going, and we would need a major integrational push from a country like Germany, perhaps also from Italy and Spain, for holding the 27 together, especially in the first year after real Brexit, especially with the new Biden administration, who will give us more chances, but also more tasks to be honest to the points where Mr. Trump perhaps had a point, like NATO, Eastern flank, China. But what he was saying and how he was saying was absolutely rubbish. Yeah? But it will be not so easy anymore to just say, for example, in this gas pipeline to Russia, that the Americans should not blame us, because Mr. Biden is not the one to blame, that he's blaming us only. And in this situation where Europe will be in a different situation to solve international problems, where the US will suddenly again positively approach Europe regarding Iran, regarding Near East, also regarding other areas in the world. We see already a situation that the German authorities are so busy with topics all over the world that sometimes the high level is forgetting about the home ground, which is the Western Balkans, and especially might be Serbia-Kosovo dialogue. Yeah. Oh, sorry, it's named Pristina-Belgrade dialogue. That was a mistake. I'm so sorry.
I would like to connect to that one because this is maybe one of the reasons.
Yeah, not Pristina.
we will talk about that. Yeah, about the terminology, because the next question is a little bit connected to that one. The question is, because Manuel already started, could you shortly describe your opinion on the work of the German presidency from your and your institution's perspective for Kosovo and the Western Balkan countries? Has the imminent work around the pandemic overshadowed the external affair agenda, which the Western Balkan is one of the points of the Council of the European Union, or has it complemented the agenda by being a key topic and touching also the other topics like the dialogue, the rule of law, and the integration process? Because Manuel was very critic about this topic, that Corona is everywhere and nothing else works. But how is your opinion? Could you give like an inside view, maybe where we have like things that go forward, or is everything like stopped and nothing happens, only Corona?
My feeling is that Corona made it better for the Western Balkans. I think that there was no aim at all from the German government to make this presidency a point where you push things forward. And I mean, I usually make the joke, I'm a European federalist, so I don't like the rotating presidency as an institutional manner by ideology. So I always made the joke that the Germans are preparing the perfect federalist presidency by not doing anything except photos. They didn't want to have a big summit for Eastern Partnership. They didn't want to make a big summit for Western Balkan states. But on the daily basis, of course, the Corona stuff made it better because the push for economic package, Viola described it, was there. And of course, also the try to get the negotiations with North Macedonia and later on Albania on board was pushed by the German government largely. So I think Corona made it better. Yeah, but let's say it in that way. We have Chancellor Merkel, who loves the region. We have good guys in the chancellery. We have a really good working staff in the region in the federal office. And we have some MPs in parliament. So the daily stuff, I think, is really in good hands. And also regarding the big fight Vjosa and Albin had was, I think, orchestrated well from Berlin. But who will be the persons who put it high on the agenda? Not only Kosovo, also Bosnia. Yeah? I think we need a new German government which is putting the future of Bosnia on a high priority of agenda, although you will not win any vote in Germany by this, but for the future of Europe. And so think about the personnel who is on the screen, which might be important in Germany in the next term. And then think who might put these difficult topics where you usually only get problems and not fast great achievements on the agenda. And yeah, I think this is a task for you, Muhamet, of course, but also for Vjosa, Albin, Viola.
I think Viola wants to.
Yeah, I just want to, I forgot one very important thing where I guess that the German presidency could have done more, but has already done something, let's say, more in the background. And this is definitely the visa liberalization for Kosovo, which is more than overdue. None of us has even mentioned this in the first round, which says a lot because we are sick and tired of this topic already. Nobody believes in this, and every interview request I get is only on Kosovo, on visa liberalization, which is absolutely unfair. That your poor citizens still do not face the same rights as everyone else in the Western Balkan. And I really hoped, and we pushed so much for getting this visa liberalization, but I think we can say the French, let's say, objections is now partly overcome with this bilateral talks and this bilateral working groups. But, and there I would like to add what Manuel has said before, I think we need a strong German government, especially to put more pressure on Macron and also on the Dutch government, and now even on the Swedish government. While you are sitting in Sweden, Albin, this could be also one of your tasks. I mean, I don't know why this, let's say, if we talk about the geostrategical prospect or perspective, as Manuel has described it before, I think Macron should really understand what it means not to go faster on this enlargement process. I think we need a strict conditionality, and this is also what I put in my draft of the report. We need more pressure on all the governments, not just on Kosovo, on all the 6 individual governments, but nevertheless, not to give visa liberalization means we do not keep our promises, and people will lose trust in the EU integration process. With the North Macedonian and the Bulgarian, this is a little bit different. I think we should really put this high on our agenda and put more pressure also on the North Macedonian government to at least respect the objections and the let's say the skeptics which come from the Bulgarian side, but in Kosovo it is absolutely obvious, and we really push, and therefore we need a strong new chancellor after September, and I really hope we can finish this at the end of next year at latest. Yeah, this is something I wanted to add. Sorry, Muhamet, that's important.
It's okay. So, Mr. Kurti, Mrs. Osmani, we change from before.
Thank you. I think that it is important to start dialogue between Kosovo and Brussels and member states, much more active with our future foreign minister, prime minister, in order to explain better and cooperate more. I think that in the last 2 years, there have been put in place certain doubts about the future of the region, as if there are other kinds of alternatives. But I think that Kosovo and Western Balkan 6 has no other alternative but European Union. All of us together, if you see in terms of population, we are like around 18 million inhabitants. And it's very important to notice that there are several millions of our diaspora in Western Europe, and they can serve as a great bridge for our first getting out from these multiple crises and then putting ourselves into the railway of progress. GDP of our region is around 40% of the GDP of Czech Republic, or less than 15% of the GDP of North Rhine-Westphalia. So that's why I keep repeating that EU should be bailing us out and bringing us in order to complete itself. EU and Western Balkans are very important for each other in terms of history, but also the future, in terms of geography, but also culture. And I think that we should intensify what I believe has no alternative, and that is EU putting itself as a continent as well, and completing itself with Western Balkan 6. To this end, we need to get rid of authoritarian leaders, to bring in democracy, and to have investments for our thirsty economies. Kosovo is a good example because conditions for change are ripe. And in our country, I believe there will be no more elections in the near future. There will be only referendums. So we have seen that in one municipality, and we will see in next elections as well, that people have already made their choice. What they seek for is legitimizing what they want. So elections are now a means to legitimization rather than of choice, because the choice has already been made. And this will strengthen additionally our institutions, and I'm hopeful for 2021, perhaps much more than my friend, Mr. Sarrazin.
Thank you, Mr. Kurti. Ms. President.
First of all, I'd like to agree with everything Viola said on the issue of visa liberalization. I think that's the one point where all the people of Kosovo have expected more to be done, and not just during this presidency, but during every single day of every presidency. This has truly become a human rights issue. It's not just an issue of technicalities and criteria any longer. We need to level up our commitment to convince those EU member states that still have their doubts, despite of the fact that the Commission has said plenty of times that we have fulfilled the criteria, and the European Parliament has agreed twice in an overwhelming vote, and not just through the statements that are continuously made by MEPs like Viola and others. But I think we really need to make sure that we convince the member states that Kosovo citizens are, they're not a burden, they are an added value. We need to make sure they understand the potential that the people of Kosovo have and how they can serve as an added value beyond all of the other challenges that we're facing. But when it comes to whether the pandemic has overshadowed the external affairs agenda of the Council, look, just translating that into our internal developments, even without the pandemic, I think we should put health, education, and jobs before the dialogue. Health, education, and economy are more important to our people than spending all our energy in handshakes in Brussels for the plenty of agreements that have been achieved so far. And as we can see, even in the past couple of days, Serbia is not implementing them. I've stressed this so many times in the past. With Serbia, you have two sets of negotiations. One is to convince them to sign, and one is to convince them to implement. And most of the times, the second is more difficult than the first. So we've learned this the hard way, but I think the European Union should also learn from this lesson. And when we are facing a pandemic, obviously, we expect that this should be the top priority. We are very grateful for all the help, the financial support, the support through medical equipment that we've received from the members of the European Union. We needed it desperately because we've inherited a health system that was underfinanced for so many decades. And for that reason, I must emphasize that all of the people of Kosovo are particularly grateful. But at the same time, we need to understand that whenever the next institutions of Kosovo are formed, we need to sit down among ourselves first. Before we go to Brussels, we need to reunify our position within us, among us. We need to speak with one voice. And that doesn't necessarily mean with only one person, but when I say one voice, I mean speaking up as a nation and representing what the priorities of the Republic of Kosovo are in this dialogue table. It may take a little bit of time, but that's the only way towards success in this process. And I do believe that after elections, that should be one of the things we should work on continuously. So try to unify among ourselves on what should be our position towards Serbia before going to Brussels. You can't go to Brussels, sign agreements, and then just come back to the Kosovo parliament thinking that only then you should start convincing MPs. You need some sort of a negotiating mandate. Obviously, the very first thing is to have the support of the people of Kosovo, but then to make sure that you have a negotiating mandate before you move on. It's a very crucial matter to take it so lightly, and that's why it requires that we join forces. But as I said, I didn't see that the interest of the members of the European Union on the dialogue fell down. Quite the opposite, to be honest. In plenty of the meetings that I had, sometimes I felt that we were talking too much about the dialogue, and I felt like I really wanted to go back to the pandemic. I needed to speak more about the pandemic and less about the dialogue. So that's the impression that I got during these couple of months, actually almost 1 year that we've been facing this deadly virus. I think I've covered most of the issues, so I'm going to stop with that.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. So as you both mentioned in the last 2 points, I think we need to address the elephant in the room, being how the countries have dealt with the pandemic, and what happens now that there is hope at the end of the tunnel with several vaccinations being made available from different companies coming from different countries. And as we see it from outsiders, well, the vaccination has already started in most EU countries. It started in Germany on Sunday, and it has started before that in the US and the UK. It is yet unknown as to when it will start in, I cannot say Western Balkans because in Serbia it also started, but in Kosovo or Albania. And recently, as a reaction to the frustration of our Prime Minister, me being Albanian, I'm referring to Edi Rama, there was a reaction from the Russian embassy offering Sputnik 5 as a vaccine towards the Albanian government. And that led us all to think as whether the help that the EU has been giving towards the Western Balkan countries, in this specific case, Albania and Kosovo, would look much better and much more practical and much more, let's say, error prone when it comes to mishandling this money, if this help came in the form of doses of vaccines rather than the monetary support that it has come through. So first of all, I would like to take the international perspective, the European perspective on this, starting with Ms. von Cramon, and then Mr. Sarrazin, you can add something in the end if you want as well.
Absolutely right, and I couldn't agree more. So, but you have probably followed the debate within the European Union that even in the member states, we do not have enough of the dose the needed dose of 500 million. While of course there was a risk portfolio where it wasn't really clear which vaccination would be the first one to be on the market available, and I think we're smart enough to say, hey, we rather cover them all, from the French one, the British, the Germans, and whoever was doing research. But I had to smile when you said there is nothing what you could have taken. Yes, the Russians are pretty keen on offering to all of the, I don't know whether it was also in Albanian news, but I've definitely read it in the Serbian news that the Russians go forward in Belgrade with Sputnik 5, where I would be very much reluctant. Even I'm a very pro vaccination person. I would take the first one if I could get one. But with Sputnik 5, I think there's a broader skepsis amongst researchers to take it. Well, I think you're right. But I have read that actually you get, let's say, a certain amount of doses very soon, if I'm not mistaken, but I don't know how many this is and for whom this is appropriate or addressed to. So I would be a little bit cautious to say this is the right way, this is enough. Probably it's not. But as I said, even in our federal states and our Länder in Germany, people complain, hey, we are too late, it's not sufficient, why we haven't ordered more, and so on. But as I said, I think the European way of giving a start for all the member states, mainly around Christmas, was okay. Not foregoing an emergency application was also very smart. And of course, when in summer times, it was not foreseeable that BioNTech will be the first one on the market. So I think we have ordered some from Seneca, some from whatsoever. And when they all will be on the market in a few weeks, it will be much easier to give to get to receive the appropriate doses for all the countries. And I guess this is also true for the Western Balkan states. But how it is now, whether you get only the money or also some of the first, let's say, charges, I don't know exactly, to be honest.
Fair enough. I think we're all aware of the demand and supply side when it comes to vaccines at the moment. But this was just one of the examples portraying how the aid could look like from within the relation of the EU to Kosovo.
So, Emiljo, if I cannot add so much, I just want to add one thing. I have actually no idea about the medical side of the vaccination. I'm Mr. Rusin. You can ask me in 20 years and I will know better. I would just offer to everybody, if you want to take the Russian stuff, try it, please, welcome. They're searching for people testing it a lot. Yeah? So they would be lucky as well. And this is perhaps the answer on all of this already. I just think what is quite clear yet is that vaccination will not open up traveling too fast. And I think that we should not underestimate, you probably know better than me, what this myth of personal contacts is changing in that mindset. Not seeing family, not being able to travel. What is about those ones who are working and going back and like you guys, you're coming from a country which is so much relying also on the physical contacts of expats and home country, but also in politics. Yeah, suddenly going to Poland from Germany is far away. Yeah, although it's only a few kilometers, but going from northwest Germany to southeast Germany, it's not a problem because it's the nation coming back, and this is a problem, I think. And yeah, and for your countries, the situation is of course even worse. I mean, now we are in Germany in a situation where we seem to be in at a tough situation for the hospitals already, and we think that we are high-end, high quality, really well technified and expert country of people who are so cautious and following rules, and this will be a major thing also for your region. But I think what is the answer on this? Not closing the borders again would be the right answers, I think. So what now happened with the Brits, with this new mutation of the virus, some people were partying it as a signal to be tough this time. I'm not so sure if closing the border again is like Merkel, when in the summer, Merkel said that it was a mistake to close the borders as first. looking to the first lockdown in March. And now it seems to be it will be the answer again. And I'm really servant in this, I have to confess. Yeah? But this is the historian only with the medical guy. But for sure, this traveling stuff is important, and people are not meeting anymore. Neighbors over the border are suddenly far away again, within the European Union as well, but also for your region. Yeah.
Okay. Ms. Osmani, you want to add something? And then Mr. Kurti?
Perhaps just to say a few words on what's the story with the vaccines here in Kosovo. Obviously, if we start with the Russian vaccine, I was asked today about the Serb vaccines in the north, and I guess the same answer applies to what Russia is trying to do. It doesn't seem that there is this is done in any way to help the people or to help the whole situation, because the way it was done was illegal. Therefore, even in the case of the Russian vaccine, they want to use the vaccine, abuse the vaccine for the sake of political influence and, in our region, destabilization. Because, as you know, consequences are both political and security wise. So that is the intention. And I believe that Kosovo should receive the help of the members of the European Union, as well as other strong allies such as the United States, to make sure that these kind of cases are entirely not just rejected, but that we're ready to respond to these kind of situations. So we need to be much more proactive in being ready for these kind of attempted influences by Russia and Serbia. On the other side, when it comes to vaccines in general, as you know, Kosovo has become part of the COVAX initiative, through which we will be getting 20% for the vaccines for the 20% of our population. I don't think that is sufficient. So the request of our government should have been much larger, because apart from the healthcare professionals who should be vaccinated first, and then people over 65, thirdly, people with chronic diseases, everyone can be affected. So I believe that we should have asked for a much higher number of vaccines in order to secure the majority of our population. And for that reason, I've discussed with our allies to see whether there are certain members of the European Union for which I've heard that they have ordered more than the actual number of their population, in order to see whether we can get a bilateral support from these countries that have ordered more than they actually need. Because with the COVAX initiative, I don't think we will be getting the vaccines until late April or even later than that. And not all the 330,000 will be coming at once. At least this is the information that we have. So we really need to find another way to see whether we can get at least the number of vaccines for the health professionals and those with chronic diseases a little earlier than that. So, of course, I'm not going to talk about the other problems that we face in terms of preparations within our health system, because, as I said at the beginning, it was underfinanced. It was never a priority. If we want the health system to work properly, we need to make it the top priority, even without the pandemic. Even without the pandemic, we need to make it the top priority, because it is one of the main elements of investing in human capital. And there's no country in the world that has achieved economic progress, and at least long-lasting economic development, unless they send their investment towards people, which is health, education, and economy, as I said at the beginning.
Thank you, Mr. Kurti.
Yes, I think that on one hand, we are tied with World Health Organization, and we shall duly follow our cooperation there. On the other hand, domestically, we should have adequate funding, and especially a predictable and clear plan regarding the waves of different social categories that will be receiving the vaccine. Regarding the offers from Russian Federation or from other Eastern powers, I think we should be careful. You can never be too careful. And I believe that aid and humanitarian help and health is a humanitarian issue outside of politics and geopolitics. And on one hand, we shall never use it in that manner, but on the other hand, we should fiercely oppose all those who try to use people in need and grave health situation for their geopolitical aspirations.
Thank you very much. Due to the fact that our time is running, pandemic took a long time now in the conversation, we would like to switch to the next topic, and I have a really important question. I would like to address that question only to Mrs. Osmani and Mr. Kurti. The question is which role do the diplomatic institution of the Western Balkan countries, especially of the Kosovo, play in the process of integration? In the past month, we have observed from the diaspora that they served more to the political leaders of the countries than to the country. So how can decoupling party and nation interests in the work of the embassies and consulates, but also in the administration, look like? Because we had a kind of tourism used to promote political parties and the ideas of political leaders, but not the interests of my family members of Kosovo or of the state of Kosovo. So I would give Mrs. Osmani the word, and then to Mr. Kurti, because he was also the leader of the commission for naming people to embassy and consulates. I think he could tell them a little bit more to that one. Please, Mrs. Osmani.
Sorry, this is the first time that I'm using this laptop, so it's it's always a little weird once you change them. I believe this is an extremely important topic and one that I've been dealing with since 2008. The very first group of embassies that was established and the appointments that were made, I believe were at least the majority of them made based on professional criteria and based on meritocracy. So some very good people represented Kosovo in those first years. And I'm talking here mostly about the appointments of ambassadors. These are diplomatic, career diplomats, most of whom still continue to be engaged. But what happened in the meantime was that the entire process of appointments entirely derailed, and it has become, as you rightly pointed out, one where diplomats were picked based on whether they serve certain political parties or certain political names within a political party, rather than whether they save the national interest. The way how this was done was illegally, because our law is very clear that you cannot go beyond the 50% percentage of political appointments, and most of the time it was over 80%, including now. I think it's very, very high. It's definitely over 50% of appointments are political, and then the other 50 at least needs to be career diplomats. I honestly believe that we should even change that and make sure that not more than 10% among heads of missions are political appointees. The other 90% needs to be career diplomats. But the problem is not only with the heads of missions, it's with the lower level diplomats as well, many of which have been appointed to the diplomatic service, to the foreign service without any procedure whatsoever. Our law is very clear on procedure. So I think that the best way to do this is simply follow the law. I tried to do that as a president, but obviously you also need a government that would cooperate in this regard. So I'll wait for the next government to be formed, and then I believe that once we have a government and a president that follows the principle of having a diplomatic service that serves the country and not specific politicians, we can move ahead with a very comprehensive review of the entire diplomatic service, the entire foreign service, and all of the appointments to make sure what has been done in accordance with the law, what processes did not follow the law, and then make sure that those that did not follow the law are returned back to Kosovo and appoint people that would truly do an honor to our country in representing it. The foreign service, it's not an internal issue. It should never be an issue of division. It should be based purely on professionalism and of course also on loyalty towards the interests of the country, because it is our very first image outside of our borders. It is really important who are the people who represent us as a country. So for that reason, this should be one of the top priorities that we set for the next institutions. But there, as I said, needs to be a full cooperation and understanding between the government and the president on putting this as a priority and putting the clear criteria which are required by the law, are required by our constitution, as well as international law, which is envisaged in the Vienna Conventions on Diplomatic and Consular Relations. So practically this, I believe, is a priority, and we need to make sure that integrity, professionalism, and meritocracy are the values that guide us when reforming the foreign service of the Republic of Kosovo.
Thank you very much.
Well, in December 2010, we had worst elections in Kosovo's after-war period. Ambassadors back then named a phenomena of stealing votes as industrial theft, and the deformation of the will of the people was at its highest point. And I believe that in 2011, immediately after, started the downturn spiral also in foreign policy and foreign service. At that time, I was chairing the Parliamentarian Committee on Foreign Affairs, but our movement had only 12.7% of votes. And generally, I was not satisfied with the people that they've put in front of me to question, but not much could be done because the majority of members of parliament in that committee, together with president back then, simply proceeded further in spite of all my complaints and critique for the candidates which were first applying and then being elevated into positions of ambassadors of Republic of Kosovo. I think that we need a foreign policy institute within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and we also need a strong diplomatic academy. And unfortunately, in the last month, we've seen the opposite of this, because the director has been basically kicked out. Very experienced man. We have to heal there as well. I will use this word of President-elect Biden, healing. We need to heal. We need to heal all over, not just people from COVID-19, not just public health system, but also foreign service. And to this end, we must build a system to bring about our best professionals, scholars, intellectuals who can represent us abroad. And we think that we have them. As Madam President Osmani mentioned, after Declaration of Independence, perhaps we had the best so far team of our ambassadors and representatives in over 20 embassies. However, I think that now we should have even higher ambitions than that. We should also include our diaspora. And I believe that we can have a decent foreign policy with a good diplomatic cadre starting from next year.
Speaking of what we can have in the future and how should Kosovo look like in the future, I would still come back to Mr. Kurti and President Osmani with a question that I would like to have a very brief answer on, an answer that, to my wish, it would consist of just 3 basic points. If you were to come in government during the next year, what would be the 3 main topics you would want to focus on? President Osmani, you can start.
I mentioned them a couple of times, but I'll need to add fighting crime and corruption. That's number 1. It's a precondition to everything else. So 1, fight crime and corruption. 2, education and health. 3, jobs, economy, especially for the young generation. It's impossible to have other priorities here in Kosovo, and our people know this best. But it was hard so far to find politicians who mean them. Now it's not hard any longer, and I'm sure that there will be no ifs to your questions anymore. So yes, I strongly believe that we're going to have that kind of government in order to achieve success in all of these priorities that I mentioned.
Thank you. Mr. Kurti?
I fully agree with Madam President. I believe that this is what people want. This is why people voted for us on 6th of October 2019, and this is why people will vote us again, but much more than on 6th of October 2019 or the next year. Unemployment, corruption, poor health system, and lack of qualitative education are major concerns of people of Kosovo. Of course, we need unity among political factors, but I believe that even more so, we need strengthening our state. So a strong state of Kosovo is not less important than political consensus, because in the recent years, we have been very much criticized for the lack of consensus, rightly so. But I believe strengthening of the state is even more important. And here I would again emphasize jobs and justice and education. And finally, in next mandate 4-year term of our government to come about with health insurance, because citizens of Kosovo, they do have car insurance, but not health insurance.
I think it's also because one of them is mandatory. But anyways, moving on from the national perspective to an international perspective on things, both I and Muhamet, we represent the diaspora of respectively Kosovo and Albania. And most of our followers are indeed followers that come from the diaspora, and our organizations are, so to say, consistent of what you would call diaspora people. Addressing Ms. von Cramon and Mr. Sarrazin, when you think of diaspora and its role to the political bodies, how do you see their actions in a way that they can support your work, both in the European Parliament, but also in the German government?
Well, I think that the diaspora plays already more or less a very important, but so far a very informal role, while you give most of the money to the, at least in Kosovo, to the budget of Kosovo. And of course, this year was different from the other years, but in general, I think that almost 50% of the GDP comes from the diaspora. And what Albin Kurti has mentioned, that, and I would go even far, I know there are some initiatives to embed the ideas of the diaspora, the networks, the entrepreneurship, the companies, so more systematically into the economy of Kosovo would give a very good example of how to interact in a more systematically and a more structured way with the diaspora. And this is not just true for Kosovo, but it could be also eligible for other countries in the Western Balkan region. And I also see, I've requested not just from Vjosa, but I'm also in contact with other diaspora representatives who said, how can we support the European level of interaction with Kosovo? And this is really hard for me to say while we are, of course, member of the parliament. I love to listen to this, but to have a more, let's say, board of advisors or anything, what would be then also heard in Kosovo, while we know that the diaspora has, of course, a very, let's say, European and let's say a different mindset. It is important to include these ideas also in the not the daily work, but of course more the conceptual work of governments, and it could be used in either the diplomatic sphere, but also when it comes to let's say economical question, business question on the micro level, on the macro level, but also when it comes to educational questions. I mean, all the experience Muhamet has, for example, gathered in Hamburg could be interested for some of the counties and some of the districts in Kosovo. And to include this in a, as I said, in a more structured way would be very helpful, I guess, for money which is given from the bilateral level, from the German government, but also from the European government. And so it means it would even multiply and amplify the money which is given to Kosovo when we could embed your advice and your assistance and your experience in a more structured way in Kosovo. So I would be very much in favor. On the other hand, just to give a little, let's say, negative side note on this, while I've worked on Armenia and you see the influence of the Armenian diaspora in Armenia is not always helpful, while actually they come with a lot of money, with a lot of, let's say, self-determination of how Armenia should look like, and the Armenian population is sometimes overrode by the very self-confident attitude of the Armenian diaspora. So we should also find ways of, okay, if you are not a permanent resident in Kosovo, you have limited, let's say, influence, but at least you should have a say. So this would be my proposal.
Thank you, Ms. von Cramon. Before I pass the word to Ms. Sarrazin, just to add a comment to the very first point you made on the amount of money that is being sent year to year to Kosovo. We found out by fact-checking with Muhamet early on the day that the remittances this year, they were much higher than last year. And and it was sort of a breakthrough in that it surpassed, I think, I don't remember the exact number, the exact benchmark right now, but yeah, it was more than last year despite of the pandemic. Thank you. Mr. Sarrazin.
Yeah, let's make two jokes in the beginning. First, which one of the diasporas of Kosovo? Yeah, strong as a country when it has a diaspora fighting united for a common goal and not using capitals of other cities for trying to put down governments at home. I don't know what I mean exactly, but just a theory. Yeah? Second is, you have a quite interesting diaspora in Kosovo. Even your foreign minister was from the diaspora. So de facto, I think, usually I make a joke in my party. If I'm going to overtake the power in my party with a popular vote, with a kind of coup d'etat, I would not use like everybody else, whatever. I would take the Albanians because everybody of them would say I'm an Italian and nobody would think that they will take over anything. Yeah? you have probably the most powerful diaspora regarding organization, which I can imagine. I think the only diaspora in Germany which is cooperating with single MPs to win single mandatory districts is the Kosovo diaspora. I think what the Viola described regarding the visa liberalization is this magical relationship between Bavarians and Albanians. I mean, don't underestimate. But I have a feeling that first, it's a part of power play in Kosovo, and there's party division inside the diaspora. Second, you know it better than me, the situation regarding those ones who stayed home and those ones who left, especially since the war, is difficult also in your country. So I think the diaspora and also the special commitment of the diaspora to the home is special and is a chance for Kosovo, but also it will not function to put everybody who is a successful businessman in Germany and so let him just govern Kosovo from various reasons, various reasons. But for sure, we will need those ones, not the diaspora of businessmen, successful guys who are inside the power triangle in Kosovo already, who have their links for playing across borders already. I think we need those ones, the simple diaspora, the teachers and the students and, you know, the Kosovarians to lobby for the sake of Kosovo at home. At home is in Germany, yeah, to help us putting it on the agenda for the next term, for the next 10 years, with backbenchers in the parliament, with the ministries, with universities, with everything. Yeah, and then Viola's of course right. Money is important, but not only. And the question would be like, for what sake this new benchmark of money sent home was used in Kosovo? Just for more villas in the nowhere, which you can even not go anymore because you're not traveling anymore, or for sensible investment in small, medium-sized enterprises? Yeah, that's also for showing off or for investing in the future of the country.
Thank you very much. So now I have a very important question that has been talked the last several weeks in the diaspora. We have seen in the last months or days some assaults against the diaspora in especially German-speaking country. And I have a special question that is talked up and down through Germany when it comes to the elections. The last elections have been a big challenge because the early termination of the government and the problems with Central Election Commission, coordination for the right to vote outside the country. That's the main topic I want to point on the diaspora. So what is your opinion about the right to vote in embassies and consulates? It's for Mr. Kurti and Mr. Osmani. Which organization in the diaspora did you consult on about the problems to vote, and how will you manage the fact with the determination of the date for the election this year and guarantee that every vote will be counted due to the fact that we had also from the Constitutional Court a decision that votes that come delayed, what was made by NISMA and AAK, should not be counted. Even the fact that the vote came with DHL to Pristina, but did not arrive to the commission. So for us, since 20 years, we are waiting because we know about the power of vote, and we know about the number that we can change everything in the country because we are the strongest party outside the country. So how will you manage, Mrs. Osmani, first, due to the fact that you are the president, how will you manage that this procedure will not be a problem again, like it was the last 2 or 3 elections? And what can we maybe do as diaspora, maybe being part of the election commission, to have like some impact to check that my vote from Hamburg comes to Pristina at the time? So maybe one answer from you, and then Mr. Kurti.
First, perhaps to clarify that I've been very much in favor of changing the law on general elections, which would allow our diaspora to vote in the consulates or in the embassies. And this has been going on for years. So in the previous legislature, when I was chairing the Foreign Affairs Committee, this was one of the amendments to the law that we very much supported, because we also, as a committee, we also covered relations with the diaspora. This has been a unanimous request of our diaspora in countless meetings that we've had in plenty of countries, mostly Europe, but also the United States, where we have lots of people living. Unfortunately, this has not been achieved. As you know, this was tried again in this mandate. It was not voted by the majority of the MPs. So unfortunately, the law still requires that there's only a mail-in vote. Now, with respect to that kind of a vote, as you rightly pointed out, there is this new constitutional court decision according to which the vote must arrive by the election date. And if it arrives later on, it would not be counted. I believe this is unfortunate because since we're going into an extraordinary election, the timing for organizing the elections is very, very short. And now the procedures to just order the voting ballots is very long. The procurement procedures in Kosovo do not change for the CEC even when you have extraordinary elections. So practically, they would have to go through the same procedures until they have the voting ballots ready to mail them to our diaspora. By the time they arrive to the diaspora is already, we are quite late in time. So when they are sent back, it is quite obvious that they take some time. So I thought that the rule that we had previously, according to which it was important when you mail the vote and not when it arrives, was one that at least was protecting the right to vote. But now with the Constitutional Court decision, it only gets more complicated, to be very frank. This has been the #1 topic that I've discussed with the Central Election Committee. In a meeting a few days ago, I asked that the very first urgent thing they need to do is to allow the diaspora to register, so that immediately once we have the voting ballots, they are mailed to the diaspora so that they can send them back this time, hopefully in a more quicker fashion than in the 6th of October 2019 elections. Finally, I know this is unfair to ask, but I do hope that, as you, plenty of you did last year, that many of the members of our diaspora will find a way to come to Kosovo for an in-person voting. It is extremely important this time. It has never been more important than now, because we just need to make sure that your vote counts. So of course, we will do everything we can from our side to make sure that procedures are fastened, and I ask that the CEC does everything in their hands according to the law to make sure that deadlines are shortened for the other procedures, so that the voting ballots can be mailed to the diaspora as soon as possible. But I still have quite a lot of concerns. So I do hope that while this is being undertaken, at the same time, we will have our diaspora, at least those living in Europe, because I understand that those living more far apart, it's going to be more difficult. We'll find a way to be present here on that day. It's going to be a historic day only if our diaspora's votes are counted.
Mr. Kurti?
Our trade deficit is over 40% of our GDP and is being financed by our diaspora. According to Central Bank of Kosovo, it's close to 1 billion euros that they bring in form of remittances officially each year, and each year more than the previous one. However, if we add to this cash money that they bring, then spending that they do in Kosovo, the financing of weddings and honeymoons and summer holidays, it amounts to perhaps around $1.5 billion, which is like 2/3 of the budget of the state. Perhaps Armenian, Greek, Jewish, and Irish diaspora, they bring more money back home, but not in this ratio with the budget of the state. It's unseen, unprecedented. So I think that from their social role of mere survival of population, by trying to compensate the lack of social state with family assistance and remittances, because so many of our family members, when they get sick with the money of our diaspora, they come to German and Swiss and Scandinavian and Turkish hospitals. We need to make sure that we are going to make them part of our economic development, not only social role, but economic factor. And we need a new economic model to that end. I don't believe that people in general are poor or unemployed because of the lack of resources, because of the culture of the society, because of the history of the nation. It's always about economic and state model. So they bring the know-how from Germany, Switzerland, Austria, Scandinavia, US, UK. They bring the know-how. They are part of dual education system, which links labor market with qualitative professional education. They are not in the payroll of our government, so they are very free thinkers, independent souls, which is so crucial for democratic blooming and social creativity. And I certainly want to have them vote in our embassies and consulates, but it's not going to happen this time. This time they will have to vote by mail as early as possible, because if the mail gets late, they are going to be blamed. And if they could come, of course, they are more than welcome, but it's also very important if they can vote by mail, because not all of them can come. We have this phenomena when 1 or 2 members of a certain family who live in Western Europe, they come to Kosovo physically, but the rest do not vote. So it's important for them to come, but even more important is that every one of them votes by mail. Let 1 or 2 come to Kosovo, but the rest should be voting as well, because it doesn't function with representation. We have sent our mother and one of our sons or daughters to Kosovo. The rest of us continue in Düsseldorf, Hamburg, or Munich. So it's very important, all of them, to vote by mail. There are some administrative, technical, logistic difficulties, but be patient. It is much more easier to fill the forms to register as a voter and in the end vote than, for example, to get, I don't know, US or UK visa. So I believe it's very important for them to try out this one more time, this last time, and then we will make sure to change, to amend the law and may enable them to vote in diplomatic representation of Kosovo, like all over Europe, but not only.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kurti. As a citizen of Albania, I can only be envious of the current possibility that the Kosovar diaspora has to vote in their election. And we are hoping that the Albanians from Albania can also have that right soon enough for our next election in April.
Can I say one thing? I fully believe everything with this topic regarding Kosovo. But it is really, really significantly interesting how much my personal opinion on this is changing if you cross the border to North Macedonia. So this is the honest point about this. You have a quite well diaspora in Kosovo. Yeah? Use it. Yeah? Other countries have a diaspora which is causing really fatigue for the country.
Yes, I
Emiljo,
cannot speak for many other countries. Yes, but anyway, so the time is due. We had 50% more questions thought out that we wanted to ask throughout this evening, but I think we are pretty happy with the amount of time you've devoted to us tonight, and we're happy with your presence. And I do wish you a good holiday season towards this end of the year, and may next year, first of all, find us all very healthy, and then we can focus on our contribution as diaspora being a mostly a net positive one, let's say it, and the Kosovar diaspora to have that extra righteous step they deserve in voting in the representative bodies. Thank you very much from my side. And Muhamet, do you want to say one last word from your side?
Yes. Thank you very much, Ms. President, for offering us the first possibility in the German-speaking diaspora to have a possibility to talk of the president, because in former time it wasn't possible. Thank you, Mr. Kurti, for joining us. We hope that the next 50% of the questions we could not do this time, maybe we will do after election as part 2. Thank you, Manuel, and thank you, Viola, for joining us spontaneous to this one, even the famous phrase of zwischen den Jahren, because we are in the holidays in between the years. You joined us, and thank to all viewers who are all around the world joining us too, give comments, give ideas. We apologize for not having the possibility to take all the questions we had on Facebook. We tried to make like a frame with as much questions as possible. We wish that you stay all in good conditions, healthy, and that we continue with our connection and cooperation. Thank you, Emiljo. Thank you, Vjosa. Have a nice evening. Until next time, maybe in Kosovo or in Germany. You are welcome. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year's.
Yes, thanks to everyone, and stay healthy. See you soon, hopefully in Pristina or wherever in Kosovo or in Brussels. Oh, I hope you come to Brussels soon, huh?
Yes.
Vjosa?
Yes, I was planning now. Hopefully, yeah.
Okay.
I'm
Then
to miss 2 days from the election campaign, but yes.
Hamburg is much more important.
Yeah, join Hamburg, because you are two people from Hamburg. Come to Hamburg. It's a great city. So till next time.
We'll definitely come, and of course, our invitation to you is always open. So hope to see you.
Thank you very much. Good night.
Good night.